Mr. Peacock.
Good afternoon. I represent John's Campaign, the Patients Association and Care Rights UK. In your addendum, you appear to accept that the concerns about the adverse impact of visiting restrictions, isolation and so on, that had been raised by people drawing on care and their supporters weren't heard by some in government, and that this was partly because they weren't, as it were, in the room. In your 2023 witness statement, you also welcome, and I quote, the emergence during and since the pandemic of groups specifically representing care home residents and their families, like Rights for Residents, who helped raise awareness of the importance of visiting. Do you agree that those groups and others like them should have been better listened to by decision makers during the pandemic?
I think, as you just allude to in that question, one of the challenges is that there was just limited groups in existence representing particularly Rights for Residents emerged, if I recall right, during the pandemic and became a very effective advocate on visiting. The department and me personally had sort of care user groups that we did regular sessions with, whether it's in-person meetings, non-pandemic times, or lots of remote calls. And those groups included family members of people who received care. They included people who were carers, unpaid carers. They included people who themselves drew on social care support. So I did have points of contact. And TLAP would be an organisation to think about in this as well. But those were more likely to be, particularly I think particularly people who, for instance, were receiving care at home. There wasn't such a strong voice from residents of care homes, is my recollection, and that is something which Rights for Residents particularly provided. And they were one of the ports of call for getting that view as the pandemic went on, and in fact subsequently leading to the legislation which I introduced to count visiting as a fundamental standard of care, now is one of the things that CQC inspects on.
You've mentioned Rights for Residents. That they were, you met with them at least at one point, if not more, and they considered that although you listened to them, their recommendations weren't ultimately implemented. So to take an example, that they favoured the right to an essential carer and explained how that could, for example, reduce the need for highly dangerous staff movement. But although that was listened to, it wasn't ultimately implemented. Would you accept that? And if you know, and if so, can you give any explanation as to why?
Yes. So, I mean, the debate about visiting is, you get pulled in two directions on this. On the one hand, you've got those who are concerned about visiting, both care homes who are worried that visitors will bring in an infection, and in fact, some of the families receiving care who want the care home in which, say, their relative is living in to have a very strict no visitor policy. And on the other side, you'll have, for instance, families like the Rights for Resident campaigners who want a much more open visiting policy. And some people will say, I'll be prepared to take the risk that my family member might get COVID, but it's more important to me that I get to visit them. So you've got both of those viewpoints happening at the same time. Arguments going pulled in both directions. And I understand from the point of view of a care home themselves, they literally got families on the one hand saying, please stop visiting, it's not safe. On the other hand saying, let us in to visit our family. So those are difficult. And then you've clearly got the context that we were dealing with in government of a lot of people have died in care homes. And the public health advice I was given, which was very strongly on the side of infection control and minimising footfall. And the record shows me having quite back and forth with public health advisors on this, saying, well, hold on, surely we can at least allow window visiting. That's not going to be a risk to residents of care homes. And actually having to have an argument with public health advisors, say, really, I can't see how window visiting increases risk of infection to care home residents. I mean, in fact, there was a point at which that became the policy, and I remember campaigners being disappointed because at the level of restriction that was imposing on visiting. It's actually something that I fought for to even allow that. So you get these tensions going on behind the scenes. And indeed a lot of back and forth about the essential care model, which I was a supporter of. But ultimately, in the policy developing process, I clearly am having to take clinical advice and advice in general on both what's seen as clinically safe and also what is seen as manageable for the care providers themselves.
And just very briefly, looking to the future, would you agree that these the views of stakeholders, like the ones I've mentioned, that they are well placed to try and help you make the best decisions, and it would be helpful for there to be a better mechanism to ensure their views are fed up?
So yes, I think it's very important to take the input of a wide range of views of stakeholders. So it's something that I did a lot of work on myself to try and make sure I was reaching out. And I think it was very helpful of the emergence of new groups. I think also, and I'm just going to pick up on one of the things you said that I had said in my statement about the importance of the people who are in the room, because one of the things I think is worth thinking of in the event of a future pandemic is making sure that you have enough people in decision-making positions beyond the individual Minister for Social Care who have a good understanding of social care and including, for instance, what makes a difference for the well-being of people who receive social care. And while in the room there was often a lot of people from the NHS and pretty much everybody has some experience of the NHS. Not everybody has experience and understanding of social care. So I think that is something to be thought about for a future pandemic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Straw. The speaker who's probably just behind Mr. Straw.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Whately. I ask questions on behalf of